research that can bring solutions to current problems and even perhaps transcend future challenges. And for us to really, bring such solutions or bring such transcendence, a whole enterprise is required to achieve this goal. So we need human capital. So we need the thinking capacity. We need people to conceptualize and implement projects. But importantly, also, we need the fuel that runs these projects, and cash or financial resources are very important to actually achieving these goals. And Professor Willie Chinyamurindi is really better placed to actually take us through this. And Prof, just apologies in advance in my struggles in pronouncing the surname. Hopefully, by the end of the workshop, I would have succeeded in pronouncing it. So I'm going to give it another bash. Professor Chinyamurindi. Did I get that correct, Prof?
That's right. That's very right.
Yeah. All right, it's all about practice. Everything in research, practice. So for those that don't know, my name is Mapisa from the University of Botswana, and we're hosting the good Prof there from the University of Fort Hare. So between Gaborone and Botswana, we have about 1,000 Ks worth of road, but through the beauty of technology, we have connected quite seamlessly. And Professor Chinyamurindi is a NRF-rated researcher. He's a promising young researcher, and recently full professor. And perhaps maybe I should just take a pause and congratulate him on reaching that level of professorship, and I wish him all the best as he progresses further. So he's a professor within the Department of Business Management at the University of Fort Hare in Alice, and his research interests broadly are within human capital development, career management, and the use of qualitative methods within the management sciences. And the good professor is a recipient of numerous research grants from organizations like the NRF and the MRC. And through this funding, he has managed to assist and mentor students and colleagues. And no surprise that he has reached this level of full professorship. And he will be having us today to mentor us on applying for research funding. And with that said, Professor, the floor is yours, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, colleagues. I want to also, let's just see where we are. We're here. So you should be able to see a screen in front of you, which has the slides for the presentation. Just to confirm, we can see the slides?
Yes, please.
Perfect.
Confirmed.
Okay, so this morning, I'm going to talk about something that I'm very passionate and interested in, which is applying for research funding, particularly in the current climate that we're living in, where we have challenges around funding. We also have a lot of challenges around finding access to making sure that our research gets noticed by people. But importantly, the issue of impactful research, which is something I've been very interested in my dealings, to actually say, how do we do this impactful research? And allow me to add that one can do impactful research without money, but one can actually edify this impact of, or this desire to do impactful research even more with the presence of money. So I'm not saying money is the end goal of everything, but I'm just saying for you to travel, for you to pay your research assistants, for you to pay language editing for you, page fees for some journals and so forth. We need money for that. A challenge that often happens is a challenge around how do we do this in a very resource-constrained environment. And this is one of the things that I have been grappling with over the past couple of years when I look at how my career is unfolding and has unfolded, where in the first couple of years of my work, I relied a lot on internal funding. And those within the South African context will then note of the fees must fall, which changed the landscape totally, because it meant that now we needed to have more emphasis and more focus on widening the pool, that same pool of funds, and making sure that other students have access to it. And we're talking more about undergraduate funding. So postgraduate studies, research funds suffered a lot. I mean, one year, I remember so well, my first ever big NRF grant I applied for, I got an email from the NRF to say, congratulations, your project was deemed fundable. Then however, whenever the however part comes in, it then magnifies things to say, unfortunately, due to the constrained environment that we're operating within, we won't be able to fund this. And so as a result, what then happened is that I sat with an acceptance letter, but there was no money to support that. So those are some of the things we're going to talk about. What I want to do is to quickly run through the presentation, and then we open it up for comments and questions. I also want comments and experiences from other colleagues so that we are also together in view of this, because one of the things that happens usually is some people have experiences that deserve mention and to be shared with. And so I'm not assuming a position that I know everything, but I just want to free it up also, and so that we can all learn from each other. So I've set the context a bit. We are living in a very resource constrained environment. And when I did this workshop in December last year in Zambia, in November, sorry, we'd not heard of COVID. And now, in view of what's happening with COVID, the belt tightening, the austerity that I probably spoke about and have spoken about when I refer to this slide is really upon us. One of the challenges that comes with this is that
people continue to languish in poverty.
Somebody's got their microphone on. Yeah. Okay. So the issue of austerity becomes a big issue. And then internally, for all academics, we've got challenges around promotion demands. Academia is very interesting to me, as I have reason. I've seen a lot of validation is needed amongst us as colleagues to the impact of the work we do through the amount of funding we can generate. Your universities much across the African continent and worldwide would start talking about things like third stream income. So this is like, imagine in a coffee room where people are meeting and everybody has a chance to boast about what third stream income have they brought in. And as a way of saying, this is my contribution and this is what I am doing. And so I've been invited by a number of universities to serve the capacity of evaluating or looking into promotions. And one of the things as a rubric that I often see is this idea of saying, has the candidate brought in any traceable third stream income or additional funds to the university, not only to the university, but to support their effort for research. We're also moving towards efforts of collaborative research. This is something I'll talk about right at the end, because it's a very contentious one. Should we collaborate or not? And I think that's one of the things I'm personally doing, seeking for collaborations, especially on the African continent. We've got research groups that we have in Uganda, in Zimbabwe. But what I noticed with this one is that funders are also encouraging this type of collaborative work. I've seen proposals being rejected because it was a one-man project or one-woman project where this candidate was just going to be doing each and everything. And part and parcel of this is a hero mentality, if you like, of saying, I want to work on this alone. I don't want to work with others, and for obvious reasons that we'll talk about a little bit later on. So the necessity, therefore, is then for research that is impactful. And it goes back to that dilemma that I presented at the start. Yes, one can do impactful research without money, but the presence of money can also aid the process of doing impactful research. And this is some of the things that will be fleshing out during the course of today. Now, 3 scenarios I want to present to you. What can happen, and usually this seeks to address aspects of fear. Scenario 1, you either apply and then you are funded, which is great. Scenario number 2, you apply and then you're not funded. And I've got experience with that, and I'm going to come there later on. Or scenario number 3, don't apply. At least you won't be disappointed as in point 2. But you have a question, and the question that will still haunt you wherever you go would be, what would happen? What would happen if you had applied? What if you are sitting on the next big piece of work that is going to aid the work of practitioners and policymakers, and all you needed to do was to take that bold leap in applying? Now, the challenge that often comes with applying for research funding is a fear that we often have, which is a fear of being rejected. I sat with the rejection 2-3 weeks ago. I got another one a few days ago. And that's part and parcel of the game, because what happens is that the more you apply, the more you get the requisite skills that you need to actually help and assist and improve your own capability as a scholar. But what I like about some of the failures that you get, for instance, I want to share one with you. This was a little bit late last year, and pardon me, colleagues, because I'm putting myself in a vulnerable position in sharing with you some of the rejection love letters I get from funding. So this was a rejection I got for an application. Thank you for your time and effort. Yes, we do put time and effort into this. Later on, I'll talk about a challenge that often happens where people try and put applications in the last 24 hours before they are due. And that's one thing I try not to do. I try to work from day one and doing it in small, manageable chunks. But listen to what they say. You've invested in participating in this call. We regret to inform you, those words that we all don't like, your application could not be funded. And I love the hope there at this particular time. So meaning maybe there is a chance. Funding requests to this instrument are always competitive. And this is absolutely true, because what happens a lot is I happen to have sat on one of these funding committees, and they had tons and tons of applications from participants. So they're extremely competitive. Given this, sending a proposal that has grammatical errors will actually sometimes cost you in terms of the outcome that you'll get. And we're going to talk about those technical details. But listen to what they say. The funding decisions are based on the peer review process, which is critical, that there must be that peer review. It's not a one-man decision. And the proposals alignment, and they explain, to maintain and enhance fairness and transparency, we have deployed an experienced panel of academics. So what the adjudication process was extremely competitive. And so we regret to let you know that this project could not be funded. One of the reasons why this project could not be funded, in my lack of meticulous detail, was that I didn't consult. One of the requirements to the instrument was that I had to consult an IKS holder. And I didn't consult that person, and I didn't put the letter of endorsement from that. So there are little things that you learn every time when you get even a rejection letter. But there are also great things that you learn when you get success stories. This is the latest project that we've started with a couple of historically disadvantaged universities in South Africa, where we got funding to the tune of 2 million rand on an e-research project that we're currently busy with. And these are great letters to get, because you frame these, because they really, for me, if there's ever a thing called self-actualization, they really position you at the apex of, wow, we've worked hard, somebody has vetted this, and we're in, which is great. You can also get a weight. Sometimes some funders would like you to wait a little bit and update your application and put it through. So it's those three possible outcomes. Those who play the game of cricket will know it's either let's go, no, or wait. So that you get out what we are trying to do and achieve. So success is really about in funding. It's all about success, wait, or you get a rejection. But the most important thing, unlike even in our interactions as human beings, is we may not tell people why we reject them. We can tell them why we accept them or the circumstances around, but the most exciting thing about the process as you go on, you learn skills, and those skills make you a better grant writer. And I'm going to share some of those things as we go on. Just do that. Okay. So let's go into some of the details. These you won't find in a textbook. These are things that I've just phrased myself to try and expose you to the different models that exist about how we go about searching for funding. Some of these models would be embedded in more traditional models that you read about in the literature. And some would be more specific to issues such as experience that a person gathers as they go on through the application process. So the first one I want to introduce to you is a beautiful story that happened last year in South Africa. And I've called this the KFC model of searching for research funding. So short part of the story, this guy was just an ordinary guy, had undying love for this girl, and decided, you know what, time to pop the question, but I'm not going to go all out and go and seek for my own fancy place in terms of a nice big hotel room and get it. No, I'm just going to go the simplest way. So right at KFC, he went on bended knee and proposed to the love of his life. Now, the story generated quite a lot of talk. It was very innovative. Some called it a genuinely authentic story about how love conquers all. Some even said that the story has happened within a resource-constrained context where he could not afford, plush and glamour and all of this, but still wanted to express his undying love. Some say the story has attracted attention and possible responses, which was the interesting bit, because what we call Black Twitter here in South Africa then erupted. People started calling the couple, well, I've got an events company, we will organize your wedding. And another one called, I've got a company that does deco, we will do the deco for the wedding. And another one called, I've got a company that does catering, we will do the catering. And so what started off as a meal that would have cost less than 50 Rand ended up being a wedding of, some called it the wedding of the century. But it then opened up people to scrutiny and vulnerability. Some people laughed, some people scorned, some people appreciated the genuineness. Some people in a period of great difficulty were very appreciative of what was happening here. So this is exactly an example of a funding model that one can take to say, think of it this way. Your application is stacked up with piles and piles of other applications. Now, what is going to make your application stand out is not drawing page borders with flowers all around, but what's going to make your application stand is the content inside, but you can work around that to actually say, I want to position something which is distinctively unique, something that, yes, it's happening in a resource-constrained funding context where people don't get a lot of money, but I'm going to work hard to try and put through some of this detail. And we'll talk about that later on, how to do it. But that KFC model of searching for funding becomes important to say, be innovative. We're living in a resource-constrained environment. Seek to attract the attention and the responses. And sometimes it's simple. If, for instance, I'm reviewing an application and the first 2 sentences have grammatical errors, it just takes the reviewer on another path to say, okay, what is this person trying to say? I'll give you an example. 3-4 years ago, I was asked to review an application. And this application happened to be from a group of scholars who were seeking to try and understand work behaviors within the context of what we call contemporary career practicing. And one of the things they did, a notable scholar in the field is a gentleman by the name of Professor David Bluestein. And for some reason, they kept on spelling Bluestein's name B-L-U-E, but his name is actually B-L-U-S-T-E-I-N. And as we were going through, those little things were so apparent to say, well, this is a seminal person within this particular context. If we cannot be paying attention to such detail, and then later on, some of the claims that were being made in the proposal were claims that were not even supported by research which was done by this author. So for me, that was quite interesting to actually say, where are we taking all of this? The second thing we can talk about is the Valentino-Acker model of searching for research funding. This is an interesting story I read a couple of weeks ago. It's deemed as the shortest Hollywood marriage between Rudolph Valentino and Jean Acker. Now, Valentino and Acker were married in 1919, but barely was the service over before the bride began to regret, to have second thoughts, and decided to lock her new husband out of the honeymoon suite. After knocking for 20 minutes, Valentine simply went home. In divorce proceedings, Acker claimed they never consummated their union. In fact, they claimed that it is not surprising given that her famed husband failed to get past the bedroom door. Now, this is quite interesting. This is what in publishing circles would call a desktop rejection, where your paper gets rejected before it even goes for review. This also happens when in searching for funding models, and also when we're evaluating proposals. For instance, this Bluestein story that I gave you, but it also happens as well when you as a person applying for funding quickly give up and do not pay attention to detail, but hope that your funding will be supported. I'll give you an example. The call is for budgets that do not exceed 100,000 pula, and your budget exceeds 100,000 pula. The call says that no machines or computers or hardware will be bought from the funding. And in your funding call, in your document, you state that you want to buy equipment. And I remember this very well. One time when I applied for funding so early in my career, I mentioned that we need to refurbish a building. And one of the reviewers then wrote back and said, well, the NRF does not apply, does not give funding to refurbish buildings. This is clearly stated on page so and so of the call. So those are things we should watch out, that sometimes rejections often happen so quickly before we even start. It ended before it started. No conscious thought, sometimes a lack of commitment and a lack of understanding of the other. And there's a bit of psychology here, because what we're trying to do is to try and understand what the funder is looking for. And they offer you ample time. If you don't understand, please write to the funder, let them know if you've got questions. What I don't appreciate sometimes is when people write 24 hours before the call ends to say, I didn't understand A, B, C, and D. I'll always say, start working early, give yourself enough time to prepare for the funding call. And then the Robin Hood model of searching for funding. This for me is an interesting one because of my efforts in the last couple of years to locate my work within African psychology. And we see this differently depending on where you're standing. The Robin Hood model of funding, Robin Hood was a villain who used to steal from the rich to give back to the poor. And some will say that, well, funding should be about corrective justice. It should be about going to look at for ways of finding ways of assisting, especially in rewriting certain narratives that may have come out due to legacies, colonial legacies, if you like, and sometimes legacies of even big corporations and how they are exploiting resources and people in communities. So that's also a model of searching for funding. And if you like, it's really driven by the principle of we need to hold some funders accountable. And these funders may not necessarily have sent out calls, but it's a matter of you as a researcher going, approaching to say, hold on, you as Shell have plantations or plants here and there in these communities. I think there needs to be some form of work that you do to support communities based on the work that you do. It's a very, very cavalier type of mentality because it needs boldness for starters, but it really works because later on I'll show you that sometimes going to ask for funding actually works very well in assisting people to take part in activities that may be available. So it's deliberate, you're seeking for opportunity, and the greater good in mind is that I want to help communities. And I often use this particularly with community engagement efforts where we approach people who are working in communities to say, look, we want to do research, but we also want to do community efforts, and we think that you should come on board as a partner. So some questions we can ask before we start. What is it that I want to do with the money? How much is it going to cost? How long will it take? Where am I in my career? You'll notice that some funding is specially suited for people who are at certain levels. You've got early career funding. Sometimes you've got career, which is funding for those who are in the midpoint of their careers. And obviously, what is the benefit of all of this? And we'll talk about some of these things, and looking forward to your feedback as well. The process is simple. I will make the slides available, so don't worry if I'm going too fast. The slides and the video will be available. So somebody has described it as a process with possible outcomes at the end. Your proposal is funded, your proposal is not funded. However, we go through a series of steps. We set your funding priorities right, gather information, your sources, and all of this does not happen 24 hours before the call closes. In fact, a British Academy advises, also I saw on their website, that if you are interested in applying for funding, please make sure that you start from day one, that the call is opened. Don't leave this too early and too late. And part and parcel of what happens too late is we're under pressure. We start then self-validating ourselves so that we are comforted about the inadequacies of our lack of preparation to say, no, this is good, let's send it. Or if it's a group proposal that is being funded, watch out for groupthink, where people try and comfort each other and are not critical to say, let's do this. And I'll talk about this group issue and also the dynamics that are at play here. So is it about money? Yes or no? I think it all depends with what your motive is. And the motive of impactful research. Remember, you may not need money to conduct impactful research, but with money, you can also conduct impactful research. So money, yes, drives the process, but also it's the outcomes that we are trying to achieve that becomes critical. So now I will try and attempt to profile what are the traits of a good proposal writer. And sometimes, trust you me, it doesn't mean that everybody has got those traits, and that's why project teams are useful, because we complement each other. But there's some traits of a good proposal writer. Ultimately, project management. You need to know what your start date is when the call is open. You need to know when the deadline is. You need to know what documents you need to prepare. You need to know if you're leading a team, who of your team members is the strongest, who is the weakest, how do you support all of that. And these are the typical things from us from a management and commerce background. We try to teach our students. So grant writing is also about project management. We need to be resourceful. And this is one thing that I've decided to do. I don't try to do everything. We're currently busy with a project where we're looking at violence in the public service and how violence, not just physical violence, but psychological violence, and how that manifests for a funder, which I'll show you the call later on. And I realized that my background and strength might lie in work psychology, but I don't have to be trying to do things where I am not strong. I need to get a team and work with other people to say, let's work together. We'll talk about the dynamics of working together. So be resourceful. Determination is critical because you've got an end date and you've got activities that must be happening, and that requires a skill of determination so that people work together to achieve those objectives. We take input and criticism in a positive manner to improve the ideas. It's nice when you work alone because the person that you're trying to persuade and convince is yourself. But when you work in a group context and somebody does just not get your idea, the dynamic at play here is also to say, we are colleagues, we are academics, we should be able to put ourselves under this anvil of scrutiny to say, well, this is what I think, tell me what you think. And it shouldn't be based on an idea of saying, no, because the power dynamic, I call it, where you have components of a team where there are professors and there are senior lecturers and maybe those who've just got their PhDs and those who are aspiring to get their PhDs. And then the professor says something and everybody says, well, surely the professor knows. So everybody then supports that idea. We'll talk about it later on when we talk about collaboration. So good practice is always to start the process early. If a call is open, some funders will give at least a minimum of a month. I've seen some other funders open a call 6 months before time to say, start the process early. And this gives you ample time to prepare. And sometimes, like all of us who are academics, you can know an assignment done by a student which has been rushed. And you can also know an assignment done by a student which is just, yes, there was a bit of effort, but you can also check out an assignment done by a student which has started way back and with emphasis for more time for preparation. So we need to learn more about the potential funding. It's like going on a date. You need to know who you're going on a date with, what background information that you have. And sometimes it helps. Some of the funders have information on their websites where they say to people, we have previously funded scholars that we have on this instrument. Have a look at their work. It also helps you to contact those people. I've recently applied for funding where I contacted the previous person who got this funding 3-4 years ago to say, look, I've got a proposal. You've received this funding before and I'd love your input. And they wrote back and said, I'll be happy to give the input and feedback. And I got that input and feedback. And that really helped because it was coming from a first-time applicant. A recipient of that funding. We need to develop a quality assurance process, which is what we do sometimes when we apply for funding to say, these are the documents that are required before we submit, which is like submitting an article for publication. Have we adhered to the journal style guide? Have we followed all the necessary procedure? That kind of helps in terms of making sure you avoid the mistake I did with that funding where I didn't read clearly and it ultimately cost me the funding. What is the long-term objectives of what we're trying to achieve? And in most cases, we want to do research that has impact. Your goal, you want tenure, you want to be a professor, you want to be a leading scholar in a particular field. So get to know your field, and I'll show you how we've done this later on when we look at streams of examples of what we have done. But also, be prepared for the prospect of rejection. That happens all the time. And because it happens all the time, the most important thing I would advise here is that every rejection should make you a better scholar. Every acceptance should make you a better scholar. So rejection does happen. We got a rejection 2 days ago where in a department we came together as colleagues. We wanted to write, we wrote a proposal and we wrote to the Center of Excellence, and they reviewed the proposal, and they've just written to us to say, unfortunately, we received close to about 400 applications. We only wanted to fund 3 applications. Yours was not one of them. We move on, but we take some of that feedback to help us to be better in terms of improving. And sometimes when things don't go your way, don't personalize it. It's sometimes due to the demand, and sometimes it just means that your proposal may not have been funded by this particular funder, but given another chance, another funder will find opportunity to fund it. The next emphasis is on ideas. Ideas are critical. Ideas are important. Ideas are what funders are looking for. I'll give you a good example. If a funder comes through and says, I want to fund a project that looks at work scenarios in Botswana and the best practices that we can get from those work scenarios, and then they usually keep it general. Sometimes they're specific as to what they want. But the critical thing with that example is that before you even attempt, first do a little bit of search, intelligence gathering. What is going on around in Botswana with regards to work scenarios? What are some of the challenges that Botswana are facing with regard to issues of work? How then do I position this idea within what is happening? And so what happens usually with that type of scenario is that the more intelligence you gather, the more you're refining your idea. I've tried to locate a lot of the stuff that I do now on this concept of decent work, which is then interesting for me because decent work is something that is enshrined even within the Sustainable Development Goals. And then I start mapping up and saying, okay, it's within the SDGs. Countries are recognizing it as important. Is there a particular context that I want to investigate decent work within this broad call? And the more specific you are, the narrower you're getting. Some of you will be aware of this funnel approach. The narrower that you're getting, you have more chance of actually producing a refined idea. So look for gaps that need to be filled. And then plant the seed of achieving each and every one of these gaps through possible questions or research questions. We've spoken about this. So assess the idea. Sometimes assessment can also happen with you being vulnerable and opening up to others. I've got colleagues who are in development studies, and I say, I'm trying to understand decent work from this particular angle, a work psychology point of view. But I would love you from a development studies point of view to tell me what you think about this. And then that gives everybody a chance to actually sit, so that you don't have this way of generating and refining ideas, which is only based upon how you think and how you see things. So we need to critically assess whether or not you have the expertise or resources or experience in managing that. And trust you me, it counts. The call is for chemistry. It's a call for chemistry graduates. And you're from the social sciences. One of the things they will do is to simply look at your expertise and then simply look at the call. And if the two do not intersect or mirror together, it can be a basis of rejection, the instant rejection where we say we don't feel you're competent enough to do that. And one of the things we are careful of as we go and seek for funding is to be careful of trying to put all our energies in different things. If you have no expertise in that, either you form a team with expertise in that, or you just back off to say, let me channel energies where these could be appreciated. So find the agents that fits your idea. In this case, your team. Know what the agency can fund, or the funder can fund and cannot fund. Read the call document. And then funding your proposal should be compatible with meeting the goals of what that funder wants. Now, this becomes a bit contentious because, so why am I doing it the way they want? Some people open it up to say, allow us room and leeway to also hear how you would approach this, and it often happens from our experience as well. Then the next part is then to try and think of issues of selling the idea. Make a good first impression, be well prepared, be credible. This often happens where funders allow you to come and present your idea. A lot of Zoom meetings are happening where funders write to you and say, as part of our process of awarding the grant, we would like to give you a chance to be able to talk us through your proposal. And that also gives you a chance not just to write about it, but to also put it on paper so that people can know. And within this, show and your writing and in your explanation where the specific gap is. The typical things we talk about when we're helping our students, that what is the contribution? What is the gap? Is this topic that you're discussing happening within wider discussions within the literature, or is this simply based upon hunches that are just trying to connect something which is not connectable? What is the gap between what exists now and what we should be working towards? I want to give you another example here. Sometimes the selling point could also be with specific sample groups. So you could say, I want to research decent work, which is what the broad call is about. But I notice nobody's looking at decent work with farm workers, or nobody's looking at decent work from the perspective of those who work in the mines. And then already you're now building some form of uniqueness to the study. And the more unique it is, the more it stands out, the more it attracts those attention. We speak to our students: attention, interest, desire, action. And that's what a proposal should have. Arouse attention, generate some form of interest, create the desire to read further, subsequently fund it, and some form of action which will get you a letter of saying that we will fund it. So you must know the literature in the field. Suggestions here, try and get, and also I understand attending here could also be students who are applying for master's, PhD, honors funding. Try and get systematic literature reviews. Just Google decent work, your key field, plus systematic literature review. These kind of give you a direction of what are the talking points. There's nothing frustrating in reading a proposal for funding, which is talking about an epoch, if you like, of a period which is 3-4 years behind. Okay, it's nice if it's 3-4 years ahead, because it shows that the person is thinking ahead. But we also search for that. I've reviewed about some proposals, 3 proposals this morning for our colleagues at Makerere University, and those are things that we note with concern sometimes, where the proposal is talking about green energy, but it's still using references and talking points which are 5, 6, 7 years old, whereas the green energy debate and literature is at a particular position and place where it's going. So you must be cutting edge, and cutting edge means that one ear is on the ground, seeing what's happening. ResearchGate, join community groups, special interest groups, so that you know and understand the talking points that are happening. The most important elements I have learned: read the instructions, read the instructions, read the instructions, read the instructions. A lot of people simply glot through the instructions of the call, and they don't really interrogate some of the requirements that are there. So make sure you read the instructions, because the instructions give you a guiding map of what it is that you want to achieve. Be realistic. Ask questions which are answerable. Some funders offer you opportunity to write. I was applying for funding a month ago with an agency in the States called the Spencer Foundation. And I noticed a few things on the website, that the technical issues were not working. The website was not recognizing certain information and places that are in the template. And I wrote to them, and I'm glad I wrote to them, because by the time I wrote to them and the time they responded, it always took 3 to 4 days. So imagine, deadline is tomorrow and you write to them today. Probably it might even affect you getting good feedback in time. So if there are technical issues from the onset, sort them out, try and ask and be clear before you start. This is what we want to do and this is what we want to achieve. The budget part. This is arguably the most important part. A little trick here. It is easy to ask people for money, some people maybe, and try and get a blank check to say, this is how much I want. Somebody gave me a tip that whenever you're filling out the budget part, try and think of it that this money is coming from your pocket or the relative, or a pocket of your relative. Because sometimes when we approach this part, what we like to do is that we like to think, well, a Robin Hood kind of mentality, stealing from the rich to give to the poor. I'm going to ask for 4 million rand. And there's no justification for the 4 million rand. There's no explanation of how you come with that figure or the necessary amounts that you're talking about. You don't have all of that. But 4 million seems like a very nice number to ask. So always remember, for each and everything that you write in the budget, this is checked upon. In fact, let me give you an example. I was reviewing last week proposals from a funder, and they asked me to review 3-4 proposals. And the funder said that they will fund close to about, it was a East African project, close to about 1 million shillings worth of funding. And the funder then says that we've worked with institutions of higher learning. And so everybody in their applications kept on saying, we're going to request money to buy a laptop, to buy a printer, to buy a projector, in addition to the other operating costs that are needed for funding research. But they were asking for things like laptop, printers, projectors, and so forth. Now, in the call, the document that the funder released, it clearly stipulated that the funder is not going to fund for those things. And it makes sense for some funders because they are working with institutions. They think, or they know that institutions already have some of these resources. And now as a reviewer, my difficult task is then to correct each and every one of them. Some reviewers will simply say, well, they didn't meet the requirements of the funding. So read through the document of what is it that the funder can fund, and also what is it that the funder is not willing to fund. This will give you a picture. And think about it this way. For everything that you're going to put in the budget, avoid being vague. We want 400,000 for data collection, but please split it up. What are you, is it for the the field workers? Is it for those who transcribe the interviews? Is it for the services of a statistical consultant? Be specific. And sometimes it's easy because we're dealing with money that is not ours, but we like to just write it. Caution, colleagues, here, a big caution. Your inability to read the style guide can cost you, not just in terms of getting the funding, but even if you get the funding, but are not able to show where and how you will spend the money, it might have an implication in terms of you even paying back that money. I know of scenarios, apologies, there's a background noise coming. Please, could we all mute our microphones? Thank you, colleagues. I know of a scenario that has happened where somebody kept the funding section vague, and they kept it vague, and the budget section rather, they kept it vague, and they wrote 90,000 will be spent on going to a conference, a local conference. But the funding instrument said that no, only 10,000 is allocated for the conference. And so they went and spent 90,000 from the operating cost. And once they did that, the auditors came, which most projects will be audited anyway. And the auditors could pick it up to say, according to the call, you only spent 10,000 on conferences, you spent 90,000. Our priority before we even release the next tranche of payment is that you replace the difference of that. And it turns out ugly sometimes, because if it's in black and white, and sometimes the challenge is with administrative offices, project offices, where they don't really pick up that type amount of spending, because spending must be pegged according to what the funder wants. So justify every item in the budget. Think of it this way: it's not my money, but I want to cover as much ground and avoid generalizations, but be specific as to what I want to cover. So present that evidence. Sometimes the evidence that's needed, I've seen sometimes with our colleagues in East Africa, they have to produce a map. If they're saying they're collecting data in a rural community, they will show you the distance from Kampala to that rural community in terms of a Google map, where the kilometers are stipulated and the government rate is stipulated and the calculation is done. So that information also helps in assisting you. Sometimes you need to also be careful that, let's say if you want to attend a conference and then you peg airfare travel maybe at 4,000 Rand, and then due to changes, always indicate that these figures are estimates as of this particular date, so that some form of consideration can be given going forward to say maybe we need to give extra funding towards this. Preparing for budget, what is funded and what is not funded. So depending on the specific call, with some of the funding that we have, we've been clearly told that we cannot spend more than 40% or 50% of our budget on bursaries for students. So what we try to do is to know that and stick to that. Equipment, charges of computers. Sometimes some funders will tell you we will not buy any equipment, so be aware of that. A challenge with COVID at the moment is issues of how do we conduct research when we are practicing social distancing. So I know of people who are doing telephonic interviews and then they are paying people, maybe buying extra storage space in the cloud to store interviews. And yeah, those types of things also need to be borne in mind. A contentious one, salaries and wages. Sometimes some people, what they try to do when they get funding is to try and then channel a chunk of that towards their own salary. Some institutions have picked it up very well. They've introduced private work policies where there is a monitoring of how much can be spent on a project and how much of that money can benefit the individual the researcher or the principal investigator personally. Now, it all depends with your own institution, but I know very well in some cases there is monitoring towards that, so to avoid people getting millions and millions and just channeling that money towards their own personal effort and self-gain. Stationery, travel and fuel with evidence there. And one thing I always forgot in the first year of my seeking for funding, an audit fee. Bear in mind that auditors will have to come in and they will need to be paid, and they will have to be paid from the project. So if you've got a project of 100,000 pula, and depending on how your institution runs it, in every way it gets audited with an external auditor, just bear in mind you mustn't spend all the 100,000. You must allow and leave some money for those things. What are some of the common failings? Applicants do not have the profile for the work that they want to do. It's in chemistry. The call is for people in chemistry. You are in psychology, unless they've called for an interdisciplinary focus, but make sure that you fit the call. Applicants are from a place, an institution that has a lot of contracts, and the national body will not fund it. Sometimes PECs are put that UCT cannot get funding because we've got 15 projects we're already funding. So some projects, should be aware of those internal dynamics. Applicants fail to demonstrate knowledge. This is the idea, and also the selling of the idea. Regardless of what the application is, the known profile of the researcher or the institution is politically less attractive than another source. This is what happens sometimes. I don't know how it happens, but I think sometimes in their human failings, we often judge certain institutions differently to others. I mean, I would think that if I put in an application and I'm from Fort Hare, and somebody puts in an application, they're from Yale or Harvard, those things also happen. That be aware of those biases. And that's why I encourage collaboration. There's an open call right now where they are looking for people from the African continent to collaborate with anyone at Cambridge University to the tune of £20,000. And yeah, politics exists there. Am I being recognized as a contributor, or I'm just being piggybacked because I'm from a developing nation context? But just be aware of those dynamics. If it works, it's good, because you also get exposure, okay, from different contexts, in as much as you get exposure from working from someone from Botswana and you're from South Africa. But just be aware that funding is also a political game, and we also be cognizant of that. Application does not address all elements of the brief. They've said 5 things must be addressed. You've only addressed 3. Those will lead to your application being unsuccessful. The design approach does not appear convincing. And in some cases, it appears like a cut and paste job from your PhD or master's student, where you then forgot to change a few things, and what the proposal is saying generally and what the methodology is saying are 2 different things. So make sure that consistency is there. Print it out, print the application out, put it on paper, take a pen, start reading through as you would read on a computer, but do it physically. It also helps the process. The application itself is academic rather than real world. And this is a challenge that often exists in trying to match practitioner interests and also academic interests. So for you to say, the project will produce a theoretical model that will assist in understanding aspects of decent work. For a practitioner like the International Labour Organization, who is interested to know issues of decent work, they may now be interested to say, okay, fine, there's this theoretical model, but how do we translate that theoretical model into something that is tangible through the work that practitioners do? And there needs to be that attention to detail. So I'm coming to an end where we can talk and have a discussion. In my experience in the last 5 years, I have been very active in trying to seek for funding for myself and for the students and the research groups that I belong to. And this funding has allowed me to do research, but also to travel the African continent and interact and learn with different people. This is how I've managed to get money. The first approach I use is an asking approach. This is very risky because there's no open call, but this is driven by a need and a desire of saying the Robin Hood mentality. I am going to go and look for that money and try and get it. It works with success, but it also works with challenges. A success here is when somebody sees that, well, we're interested, this is good. A challenge is often we have not prioritized this on our budgets for the company, so we won't be able to assist. So think about it in your work as a scholar. Don't wait for a funding call. Sometimes go to your national funder, go to companies around you, go to your institution and try and seek for ways to say, I've got this idea. This is why I think it's a brilliant idea. And I would like to discuss with you on possible ways we can look into funding the idea. So that becomes critical. But don't be quick to expose that you need the money, because it becomes apparent, but also push the benefit of the partnership. I would like to be, when I'm robbed into a project, I would like to know what is the benefit, my benefit in view of the greater good of what others are trying to do. You can approach the private sector, the public sector, NGOs. We approached one time a government organization, and we said, we want to do research on something so basic like well-being within the workplace. This is what we're offering. And sometimes even when you go there with some money yourself to say, I have a bit of money. I've got this fund that I've got. It's about 10,000, 15,000 Rand. Please, let's work together because I want more access. And they can say, okay, we'll see what we can contribute, or we won't be part of it. The second thing, always constantly look out for expressions of interest. Now, this is something I took from a workshop we did in Zimbabwe. Basically, in Zimbabwe, there's a NGO forum or a network called kubatana.net. What they do every week is they post calls of what's happening. And put simply, in our work as scholars, one of the things that we should be actively doing, and trust you me, I do this every week on a Sunday or a Monday, I just sit down and I just search to see what information is out there. What do we know is going on, and who's looking for funding, and just some form of intelligence gathering. Sign up to some of these databases. I'll show you some later on. Sign up, express interest, let them know through their mails, sometimes sift through it. You will find that you'll get a lot of rubbish and junk in the first couple of days. A website that you should constantly check out, it's something called Opportunities for Africans. This is a website, I don't know who runs it, but I really commend the guys who run that website. What I've also done on Twitter is I follow them on Twitter, and any tweet that they send out, it automatically comes onto my phone or device to say they've posted this. And this is where I get most of my funding opportunities, and I'll show you some of those. Country collaborations are critical. So let us talk about this one. Should you collaborate or not? Collaboration is a nice, beautiful thing that all of us should be doing, working together, not working in silos, but it comes at a cost. Here are some of the drawbacks. One of the drawbacks is a power dynamic, where one person becomes more powerful than the rest of the group or the research team. And so powerful that person is that they literally are the person that everybody then looks for direction going forward. You cannot disagree with this person. You accept what they are saying is set in stone, and this is how it's going to be. Collaborations also expose another risk, and it's a risk of groupthink, or a challenge of just having people who are on a team but are not contributing to the team. And this is one thing you should watch out. I have a colleague who's at the University of Stellenbosch who has told me that one of the things they do is when they're collaborating and writing a paper is they will work with someone, but they will pick up the bad things that they notice with working with this person and not do it again or not work with that person. So think of yourself as an active member of a team, not just as a passive person who, when the funding comes, you'll say, I want to be part of this. Collaborate, but also make sure that you have a voice, and your voice becomes critical, especially at a time such as this when we would like to know what each member of the team collaborates. And this is an example from the British Academy. You can also check the British Academy. They have excellent funding options there. One of the things you will notice is they will then ask you to collaborate with somebody in the UK. So imagine, with this call, they are saying that they will offer £200,000 for 24 months from the duration of the 1st of April and finish after 2 years, of course. But the interesting thing is that it's not just you. You now need to go and find somebody who is in the UK to work with. And those are the issues that we're talking about, that there must be that form of alliance and working together to achieve that. So collaborations have drawbacks, but they also have advantages. I often think that I wish there could be 5-7 replicas of me when we're working on a project, so that I can say this one is in charge of the technical quality assurance, this one is in charge of that, and it gets the work done. And it's really, really a critical thing, colleagues, to try and find a team that fits into the ideas of what we are trying to achieve. And that's always a difficult part, because sometimes you have, somebody calls them free riders, people who just tag along. But sometimes you also have people who will disagree sharply that it will be good for the project, but also it will also be bad for the relation. So that balance is also needed. A useful funding agency we can talk about is Codestria. I know very well that they were supposed to hold a workshop at the University of Botswana, a training workshop, but I think because of COVID, it didn't happen. But if you check out their website right at the end of the year, they usually have excellent funding opportunities that are there. And I like them because they are also targeted towards Africans and assisting Africans to do research. So we spoke about collaboration. I'll give you an example of something that we've just completed this morning. From around 4 o'clock, I was up trying to do some reviews for Makerere. This was brilliant because this I think will be a good learning experience. Be willing to also review. It's important to also review. I know a lot of times we like people reviewing our work so that it gets published, but we don't review. So always when you have time, sign up to be a reviewer. It actually helps in terms of getting that experience, because you also start seeing things from the other side of the other people. So here are 5 open calls, international ones, and we can talk about. I would advise you check out the website, Opportunities for Africans. Subscribe to their Twitter posts. It will also give you some useful information. The first one, which I think is quite interesting, is this open call by the Agropolis Foundation for 2021, which is an innovation award for food security. They're looking for groundbreaking scientific research. So I know it's broadly food security. If you're in psychology, you can try and get colleagues to work together on that project with expertise, obviously, in food security and expertise in psychology, trying to fuse them together. A total of $75,000 US for that one. Another one, which is quite interesting for those who do research on women, it's the African Women's Development Project, which is offering a mini grant for African feminist change makers in those areas. And you'll notice COVID funding appears a lot. So there's a lot of emphasis on COVID these days. Another one, this is open currently for a Fulbright fellow in America. What is interesting about this one, at least for me, is that it's got a teaching strand and a research strand, where on the proposal, on the application form, they will allow you to put in a proposal that you want. And then when you put in the proposal, they will offer you opportunity to spend 3 to 9 months in the USA at a particular institution, developing your interest in that particular proposal. Please note, some of these are mostly for full-time staff members, but what we can also talk about is that the same principles that we're covering today would also be specific for those who are applying for student funding. And in most cases, student funding applications require you to also have a proposal to show for. One which is currently open, the Knowledge Frontiers Interdisciplinary Research Grant. Again, this is from the British Academy, so in most cases it would require you to work with somebody with a ground in the UK to streamline, and also maybe you can have a team, but you must have a partner who's in the UK. And then something which I'm currently busy on, it's the HFG Foundation. This is a foundation that looks on research on violence and aggression. So this is quite interesting for some of our psychology people. The themes are violence, aggression in relation to social change, intergroup conflict, terrorism, family relationships. And what I'm doing here on this project, the grant that is to try and look at the notion of violence, and not just physical violence, but also psychological violence within the confines of the workplace, particularly the public service. Awards fall between the range of $15,000 US to $40,000 US for a period of 1 to 2 years. And you can apply for more money. and more duration, but this must be strongly justified. I'm leaving you with some websites, advanceafrica.com. Every day updates its web page where you can apply for funding. Opportunities for Africans, the one I spoke about. Emeralds also has research awards specific to African scholars. Another set of funding that you can also apply for are what we call fellowships. This is an example of one which I think had opened in January. It's called the Africa Oxford Initiative, where you partner with somebody at Oxford and then allows you and that person at Oxford to have some form of mobility as you move on. The African Academy of Sciences are also good because they fund a lot of research, not necessarily in the natural sciences, but on any form of sciences that exists. And then there's a database also, I've put the website there, of STEM grants, those who are working in areas of STEM. That is also good because it gets updated almost every day. You also have funding that also comes through embassies. So you can check with the website of your local embassies, the Australian embassy, the Irish embassy, Spanish, and so forth. They do offer funding that will be able to assist researchers. So colleagues, in a nutshell, I've been speaking for about 56 minutes now. The journey is rewarding. All you need to do is to devote some time, and the more time you devote to the process, it will actually be helpful in terms of experiencing some real tangible gains to it. And one of the things I want to encourage all of us to not work alone, to find others to work with. And also, as you work with others, make sure you also clarify terms of conditions, terms of operating, so that everybody is in the same wavelength of what needs to be achieved. I wish you all the best, especially the students who are looking for funding under such times, and also colleagues who are working in universities who may be also looking for fundings, that it is possible. Keep pushing, learn something from that rejection, and it definitely will assist you. Thank you.
Nanza Teddy.
Thanks, Professor. That was really, really insightful and very crisp and clear for everyone, I think. You know, I think there's a lot that we can really glean from this, and maybe we can take an opportunity to take a few questions. We have about 47 participants active, and I'm sure they have questions to ask you. Thank you. So those that want to ask questions, please just unmute your mics and shoot to the professor.
Thank you very much. May I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead, sir.
Yes, please go on.
My question is just a general question, Prof. Chinyamurindi. It's about on impactful research. Your understanding of impactful research from an academic perspective. I mean, I've always struggled to, to deal with this issue of impactful research as an academic, because in my understanding, when I conduct research, I want to contribute knowledge. So in most cases, the outcome is a paper, is an article, is not something, is not a how should I put it? I guess you understand. I want to contribute knowledge, so I don't know how the impact of such how is determined.
Thank you for that question, sir. Very important question, and that can also be bounded by context. So I will speak from what I have learned in the last couple of years and how we can link it up. I think impactful research is research that has a balance in terms of a three-legged chair, if you like. a three-legged table. The first of those, as you have put across, knowledge production, which is what we end up with a publication. But I think there are two strands that I'm always interested in as I do research, which is the practitioner and the policy side of things. And I can say that because I'm working in a work psychology context. I work with practitioners in the form of industrial psychologists, HR practitioners, managers, and so forth. But I'm uniquely also located within a policy context where there's a local government, the biggest local government offices here in the Eastern Cape, right next to where I stay. And so the issue then is not just about the knowledge production, but it's also about those other two strands. How is your work informing the other two strands? And what you will notice, what I do in every grant, apart from the usual things of saying, we'll produce a paper, we'll do A, B, C, D, there are three things I think we should always advocate that we're going to do. The first one is a science engagement event that is informed by the research that has happened. So you've done research on stress in the workplace, in the public service. The next thing that we need to ask ourselves is that, okay, perfect, great research. You've produced a paper. It's been published in Journal of Vocational Behavior, great international journal. But what have you done to convey or to communicate those findings to the community that you are working in? Have you contacted managers and in the public service to say, I want to invite you to the University of Fort Hare, to come to the University of Fort Hare and for a workshop where we're going to use, and I put a budget to that, where we're going to use a part of that budget to do a whole day workshop with managers to say, we want to share with you the findings that we have come across. And we want you to be part of this conversation and discussion that happens. The second thing is the channels of expression of where our work is being published. It's great to publish in high impact factor journals. Our work requires us to do, but there are also outlets that we are not exploring. I learned this the hard way and the easy way. There's one time when you just publish a paper and it ends there. But somebody then told me, why don't you channel your article towards a newspaper format with the Conversation Africa? So I wrote that article, sent it to the Conversation Africa, and we polished it. Or sometimes we have to change the language because we speak Academese, which might not be something that the ordinary person on the street understands. We changed it, we polished it, it got published in the Conversation Africa. Within that month, I had TV interviews with television stations in Nigeria, in Kenya, and Uganda. I had calls from radio stations in Togo. I had called from a radio station in Djibouti. I have never been to Djibouti. I don't even know where Djibouti is on the African continent. But what happened is that a lot of people were interacting with that work because it got, that Academese language got taken out of it and it could relate with ordinary people. So science engagement events, make sure you're able to also communicate to public forums like newspaper outlets and television. But number three, always produce a policy brief based on the research. Always then say, we are going to produce a policy brief that we're going to send to so-and-so managers. And trust you me, the way that managers in the public service love it when we send these, we put it on nice glossy paper, we put it on a nice PDF as well, we put it on a flash disk, and we put it in a nice envelope and send it to them to say, this is research we have done. And by the way, you gave us access to come and do this research. So we are equally held accountable. And here is the research. We want you to have this research. And that's where impact comes in. Impact is not only knowledge production, but balancing those other facets of practice and policy.
Thank you, Prof.
Alrighty, thank you for that answer. We have, I see a question, a hand up. I think that's Popeko. You can shoot.
Okay. Good morning.
Morning.
Thank you, Prof, for this very important and topical topic. I'd like to highlight that, even here, the reason why or maybe start by thanking you. Thanks a lot for giving us this opportunity to learn from you and your experiences. And, here at the University of Botswana, I think the demand for us to bring grants has been highlighted, has been escalated. So we really, really needed this particular lecture. And, as you were making a presentation, I kept and maybe what I'm really grateful for is the fact that you were able to give tips and insights as to how to access funds for people or academics who are in situations, because here in Botswana, we don't have something similar to the National Research Fund of South Africa. So I really like the ask approach. Interestingly, it's something that I have never thought about. So I think it really gives us opportunities to innovate and be creative in that space. But I think above all, our internet here is very unstable. So I just wanted to take this opportunities when it's here to say thanks a lot for this, and we greatly appreciate it. And I think both the academics and the students will benefit from this information that you just shared.
You're most welcome. Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to share. Thank you.
Alrighty, thank you. We have a hand up from Luvuyo.
Yeah, can I? Hello.
Yes, sir. Luvuyo.
Yes, my name is Ngarava. I think, Prof, you know me. Yeah. Thank you very much, Prof. This is also a field. I'm still young in this research thing in proposal writing, so I wanted your help on something. It was sort of like an industrial call, the Red Meter Association. But what they did was, one, there was no budget structure. They just said there's an open call for this. We want you to analyze the industry in terms of this and this. So there was no budget structure per se. Prof, how do you deal with something like that? Because how do you not overshoot and then you sort of limit yourselves in terms of the opportunity? Or how do you avoid undershooting and then you sort of undermine the operational activities of the project itself? Because I thought that was a bit vague from the call itself. How do you balance those issues? That's number one. Number two, there was the first question was in terms of output. Us as academics, we are looking for those journals, those working papers and all that. But there was one, it was on the same project because we had to partner with other partners. And one partner was very good in that aspect. They were looking at, okay, let's do the what they call that theory of change thing that looks at the inputs and all that, the activities, the outputs and the outcomes. And usually the outcomes from the person who's funding does not really like those journal articles, because I prepared one and then they say, let's cancel it. They don't really like those journal articles. What they want is something that can change the way what is being done within the industry. So, Prof, how do you sort of like strike a balance between your need as a journal, is academic output, and as well as the need of the sponsor of the funder itself? Thanks, Prof.
Okay, thanks a lot for those questions. The first one, no budget structure, quite interesting. I've not heard of that, but if it does happen, and I like the fact that you are concerned about undershooting and overshooting, I think I would just write an email to the people who've made the call to say one of the things that we notice is that there's no budget structure. please, could you provide clarity on this? And there's nothing wrong with asking, because I think that information is really, really needed. So ask for clarity, just write to them. The second one is also linked to the first question that we had about framing impact. For me, what's critical here is understanding also the role that different stakeholders have to a project. Some stakeholders are concerned and interested in tangible outputs, and other stakeholders may not understand the things that we want. So I think try and find out what it is that the stakeholder is prioritizing, and then try and align those needs of the stakeholder to what you're trying to do. You can put your interests of a paper and stuff somewhere behind and put what the stakeholder wants. I think it's a call that just needs you to connect with the call that has been put out and try and understand, and then position your understanding within all of that. It's a difficult one because they may not understand the impact of publications. So they want a physical product that can come out of the process. But those are things that you should know from the onset when you start, so that you don't have a situation where at the end of the funding, they say you didn't deliver.
May I ask a question, Prof?
Go ahead, we can hear you.
Okay. I'm not sure you remember me, but that's okay. I wanted to ask about, first, to thank you for the presentation, and secondly, to ask if you provide any sort of mentoring, or if you can link one to a mentoring, group of a sort for young, early career people to get in this line of, research, funding, and progressing in that field. So yeah, that's my question, if there is any such mentoring, if you provide mentoring, or if you know of a group of people who are willing to mentor early career people in this area of,
They're different groups. I mean, personally, yes, if time permits, if you write an email to say, look, I've got this thing I'm working on, can you offer advice? Time permitting, yes, of course. But I think when I look through my career, the networks that we belong to, they're always there. There are internet groups. Don't be shy to join research groups that are there, societies. We've got here in South Africa, the Psychological Society of South Africa. I belong to the Division for Research Methodology, where we interact with different scholars. So I'm more than happy, where time permits, to say this is, I can have a look, but obviously just look around your networks, your institutions, people who can provide some form of a resource pool. And I'm sure that research offices in the different institutions should be able to also assist in the technical adherence that may come with some of these projects.
Thank you.
Great.
Luvuyo, you can shoot your question.
Thank you. Yes, this is Choco Luvuyo here at this side. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Mr. Luvuyo, Choco.
Thanks, Prof. Thanks for the wonderful talk. Two simple questions, and they really relate on the funding, as you've been speaking to us, and I've been really enjoying the discussion and the presentation. In the area that I'm interested in, which is gambling addiction, right? It's not a kind of a romantic area that in Africa, in South Africa especially, in our continent, it has not been researched at all. I'm currently putting a proposal that I want to share with you. But in Europe, in Asia, in other countries, it's a well-researched area. And now one is trying to find out and to think potential possibilities of funding this area. because it does appear that although there's paucity of research, there's limited research, interest in this area seems to be very, very limited. And those who may have funding may not be aware of the challenges associated within this area, including some economic opportunities that are available since gambling was legalized post-1994. So one question, what are the typical interests around academic institutions within the area, the field of study of gambling, gambling addiction, gambling economic opportunities? Two, what could be the interests of funders, whether private, NGOs, as you have said, individual people, or even the state institutions, your CSAI, or your NRF, as you've been saying? Do you think that there could be interest in that area? Because there's quite a lot of work that has not happened. You look at all universities in South Africa, there's none that is presenting this area as a field of study, basically from the undergraduate level to the postgraduate level. I've been trying to submit proposals to a number of universities. I can't find research supervisors around this area. So those are the areas, Prof. Sorry for taking too long, but thank you very much for listening. I hope you can respond. Thank you. I will listen.
Thank you, Mr. Choko, for those questions. And we can have a discussion afterwards. I would say, and your question to our Botswana colleagues, the question is also a located question within our context, but it's something that we can also expound on. Sometimes there's no harm in taking your proposal or idea straight to the highest office in the land that deals with matters of science innovation to say, look, I'm noticing this gap, and I think we need to have a discussion around this area of study, and this is something I'm willing to address. I think this the clearest example of this happened during the COVID period, where one of the academics at the University of KwaZulu-Natal simply approached our Minister of Higher Education with an idea, and the idea was shared. And the next time the minister was doing one of the briefings, announced that they will be funding this idea. And the idea was simple. The idea was about trying to find ways of connecting psychologists who are in training and how they can still complete the necessary requisite issues and hours that they need to have, while at the same time cognizance of social distancing and issues like that. So one of the things I would recommend within a South African context, there's something called centers of excellence and research chairs. It's a matter of approaching the NRF and saying, we would like to talk to you about the importance of this angle. Can we find an institution that can house this idea? And then where I also get ideas are conferences. You network, establish your work, send the proposal to a leading scholar internationally in this area to say, this is something we want to develop in a South African context. Please, could you offer guidance on this? But also, most of us are on Facebook. We also need to join ResearchGate. On ResearchGate, in the questions forum, write your question. Interested in networking and collaborating with a lot of scholars who work in gambling addiction, please contact me. Put a lot of tags, hashtag gambling addiction, and it has worked wonders for me. Where when I was doing research on narrative inquiry, I put out a question. I found other people who were willing to collaborate with me, but importantly, it was a door not only to advancing myself as a scholar, but to a door to international community. So ResearchGate is useful. Ask that as a question to say, are there any other African scholars who are interested in working with me on this idea? And then when you then use that as a platform to go and approach stakeholders, it becomes actually interesting and something that can work. Centers of excellence and South African research chairs are possibly the best routes you can take.
Great. Thank you, Prof.
Any more questions for the good Prof? Prof, while people are still thinking about more questions, I was curious, particularly for our context here in Botswana. What advice would you give to countries like us who don't have an established funding body like the NRF or the MRC? Like, if they were interested in coming up with such a body because one is being touted, what do you think such an agency would want to look at, and what suggestions would you have for it?
I think I would say, look, guys, look into more collaborations internationally. I wrote to Dr. Peko here. I had read some of her work, and that's how I've come to know her, because I read an article of hers, which she published in South African Journal of Human Resources. A very interesting article using a sample of women in management positions. And I kept a list of myself that, one day when we've got a project we want to work on, I would love to reach out to certain people. So sometimes, yes, I understand people have different resource constraints, environments. I think a lot of the international funding that I'm seeing is requiring collaborations. I would advise colleagues to check out Opportunities for Africans. On that website, you will see that the fellowships, travel grants, scholarships, you name it, opportunities for Africans to link up. And then we need to have people coming together in those, not working in silos, reaching out to each other to say, remember that project on violence you're working on? Can we not collaborate and we work together? Now, that also presents a set of complexities that may exist. For instance, some projects are open to certain countries, but you can have collaborators in different countries. What I would appeal there is not to see the other countries as just a dumping ground for data collection, but to see them as colleagues who are also reaching out, especially in view of constraints they may have in their contexts.
Hello, Prof.
Yes.
Yes, I have a question, Prof. Your experiences. We applied for funding, and then we got it. We partnered with some people from Netherlands. We got it, but then that was before COVID. And then once we got it, we had then the fund. It was NRF. They partnered with the Netherlands University. Once we got it, they then said no, because of COVID, we need to input certain aspects of COVID within the proposal that we had written. So I want to, from your own experiences, Prof, how do we deal with that? Because it seems like we have to change a whole lot of things from the initial proposal that we did. What are your own experiences from that?
I've never experienced that, but I think COVID becomes a very important issue and a priority. I think if you're looking for funding, research funding, and if you just Google COVID through embassies and all of that, you'll see there's a lot of money going around COVID. I think it's just negotiation and issue selling, realizing if you feel fundamentally that the project brief has changed and you're not able to do this, either you can say, can we get somebody who will focus on that angle? Or you can just say, unfortunately, because of those changes, we are unable to work together. It doesn't mean you have to accept every piece of funding, because there's a form of accountability that will come through with that. So if they are telling you that let's change those aspects in view of what is currently happening, negotiate and find out what's the best possible way without burning bridges, to say, let's work together. But if it means you bring in somebody who can focus on that aspect, it will be helpful. But I've not experienced that in terms of I've experienced a scenario where I've been told you have the funding, but we're not giving you the money because there's no money. But we just wanted to let you know, maybe as a form of psychological gratification, that you've got the funding, but there's no money.
Any more questions?
Okay.
No, any more questions, colleagues? When we see. Prof, it doesn't look like any more questions from participants, yeah? And I was just curious just to find out from you, particularly with the collaborative work, eh? And you know, say University of Botswana collaborates with Forte on a particular grant, and just how do you negotiate differences in grant administrations from the respective universities? You know, say one university would allow a particular expense, but the other university would not tolerate it, and they have different almost practices in terms of how the grant is administered.
Good question, because we're currently experiencing that on that grant that I showed you, where we've got 4 other institutions. So the model would work something like the institution where the principal investigator is can assume the position of the hosting institution. So in this case, Forte is a hosting institution. And then what we then can do is that every other person who is benefiting from the project, though they may not be at Forte, they will accrue any form of benefit from the project. And I think it also makes sense in terms of organization and administration to have it all centralized at one place. So let's say if you are on the research team and you wanted to go to a conference in Zambia, we would then get you to comply with the supply chain or the requisition details of how do you book flights, and then you send those documents to us, and then we process them from this side and then send you the funding, the proofs and whatever payments that you need. So it really works in the sense that the PI, the principal investigators institution, automatically assumes the grant administration role, unless the MOU, which is critical whenever you get these funding, to sign MOUs, unless the MOU stipulates something totally different, to say we will sign 2 MOUs and a certain disbursement of the funds will go to Botswana and the other will South Africa, but it's the same project. So yeah, those are the 2 modalities that can possibly work. Chair, are you still there?
I mean, I just got back now. There was a interruption network. Prof, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. I think I've answered the question. I don't know if you heard it.
Yeah. No, I heard the bulk of it. I think it makes sense. And I think it highlights the need for clear objectives and written contracting when it comes to collaboration. I think that becomes very, very important.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree.
Yeah.
So what I'll do, Chair, through you, I will for the colleagues at the University of Botswana, I will send the slides and the link to the video to the organizing team. And for the colleagues in South Africa, please could you just send me an email on my email address, which should be showing on your screen right now. And then I'll be more than happy to send you a link of the video, including also the slides.
That's wonderful, Prof. On our end, and perhaps from all participants, we really like to thank you for that insightful and very practical workshop on how to actually access funding. And I really liked what you emphasized, that impact need not always mean funding. They need not always be funding to make impact. And I think that's a very important truism that we need to hold as researchers, that, you know, the two have some relationship, but it's not always a given relationship. And I really like just the idea that, you know, some of us don't start because of a fear of rejection, and that can be quite crippling, because, you know, rejection should be our lover in this field of academia, and we need to really build a very wonderful, strong, and romantic relationship with rejection as we strive for excellence. I think it's very, very important. And on that note, also, you know, thank you for sharing just your vulnerabilities and your experiences with rejection. I think most people, you know, often speak about their successes and that they've gotten such a grant, they've attained so much, and we sometimes never hear about the so-called rejections, which are very important for the learning curve. So with that said, Professor Chinyamurindi, thank you so dearly for that wonderful talk, and we're looking forward to more engagement in terms of the areas of research and collaborating. I'm happy to hear just your interest in working with people like Mpo, and how this can be extended also to, you know, other colleagues. So just thank you, and I wish you all the best in your new role as full professor. And, you know, judging from this presentation, it's a promotion well deserved.
Thank you. Thank you, colleagues, and let's keep writing and supporting each other. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.